During the past few years, strong movements have developed among women and among homosexuals seeking their liberation. There has been some uncertainty about how to relate to these movements. Whatever your personal opinions and your insecurities about heterosexuality and the various liberation movements among homosexuals and women, and I speak of the homosexuals and women as oppressed groups, we should try to unite with them in a revolutionary fashion. I say whatever your insecurities are because, as we very well know, sometimes our first instinct is to want to hit a homosexual in the mouth, and we want a woman to be quiet. We want to hit a homosexual in the mouth because we are afraid that we might be homosexual. And we want to hit a woman or shut her up because we are afraid that she might castrate us or take the nuts that we might not have to start with. We must gain security in ourselves and therefore have respect and feelings for all oppressed people. We must not use the racist attitude that the white racists use against our people because they are black and poor. Many times the poorest white person is the most racist because he is afraid that he might lose something or discover something that he does not have. So you're some kind of threat to him. This kind of psychology is in operation when we view oppressed people and we are angry with them because of their particular kind of behavior or their particular kind of deviation from the established norm. This is an excerpt from a speech titled "History is a Weapon: The Women's Liberation and Gay Liberation Movements." It was a speech given by Huey P. Newton, founder of the Black Panther Party, August 15, 1970. What do I mean by the evolutionary gene? It's what I mean by that is pretty simple. It's really just about what is it that people are, when you have that part in you that wants to go beyond what it is that you were taught that you need to, what is it that you were taught that you need to be, who you were supposed to identify with. If you come from a privileged group, i.e. a white male, for instance, you know that there really isn't anyone else. You know that you are the only one at this point who's sort of at the top of the social food chain, right? I mean, a man like John Brown, for instance, where in his time period, I mean, you could have been the laziest drunken bum in the world and be a white male, and yet you'll find yourself, if you wanted to clean up, you would work really hard, most likely whipping slaves for whatever money that you got paid to do that for, field foreman, save up that money, buy yourself a plot of land, and then you can then go and have slaves yourselves. Oh, and then you would have to do the hard work of killing whatever Native Americans were living in that area who might have been a threat to taking your land back that you are in turn stealing from them. And then, so I mean, he lived in that period, and yet through, down to whatever core part of him, he most likely would have said it was about God. He was a very deeply religious man. He cared enough about a whole group of people that he was not a part of to want to get hanged later as he led the raid on Harper's Ferry to free slaves. Now, he obviously had it in him to want to look beyond his group, his privilege, his class, and to help those who, by rights of general society, said, "Hey, you're above these people. You're better than them. You don't, you know." But he didn't want to go with that. That's not what he believed in, and he paid with it for his life. And then you've got Yuri Kuchiyama. Now, I've spoken with her before. I've spoken about her before, as you all know. She was, because she passed away. She was a Japanese radical activist based in Harlem. But see, before all of that, she lived in an internment camp as a young woman, where she met her husband. And she's a Japanese American. She was born in the United States, in California, and she, like so many other Japanese Americans, were put into camps in Mississippi during World War II, because we were at war with Japan, and they didn't. In this country, felt that its own citizens, who happened to be of Japanese descent, could not be trusted. So they were imprisoned. I don't even like to use the word internment. It's a prison. They were prison camps, and that's where we put them. And she, like so many of her people, once they were released, once the war was over, they were allowed to return to whatever lives they could return to. But she didn't do that. The experience radicalized her, because while she's sitting there as a prisoner in her own camp, not just paying attention to her own self and her own people's predicament, she dared to give a shit about what she saw black people were going through in the Jim Crow South. She cared. She gave a shit. And she then moved to Harlem. Her and her husband moved to Harlem and got involved with the politics there. And at the time, the undisputed main leader or organization for black liberation at that time was indeed the Nation of Islam. But, and at the time, the face of the nation was indeed Malcolm X. And then when he quit, Yuri truly followed Malcolm in terms of listening to his speeches and working with others politically, who were outside of the Nation of Islam or outside of what Malcolm was trying to do, but working with African Americans and whatever different things that they were dealing with housing, police brutality. She was involved. She was helping. She didn't have to do that. She could have gone. Her and her husband both really could have stayed in could have moved back from into California from Mississippi, and did whatever they could do to regain their lives in the American dream and become middle class, like a huge amount of people of her of Japanese Americans of her generation after that kind of an experience. But she didn't do that. She gave a shit about somebody else that she was not a part of and not part of that group. Then you have, right now, currently, the three women who founded the Black Lives Matter movement. And again, whatever criticisms you may have about the movement, that's neither here nor there right now. The point is, you've got three women, middle class. One of them is definitely a lesbian. The other one, all three of them identify themselves as feminists, and yet they started a movement that is trying to champion or trying to stop the murders of black people. Not black people in general, but statistically these women know that the majority of those who are getting murdered by the police are indeed males. And, we can guess at their sexual orientation. We don't give a shit. The point is that black men, for the most part, are being shot and murdered by the police. And yet these women founded this organization, right now, currently the only real active militant organization fighting against police brutality. They didn't have to do this. They don't. They're highly educated women, these three women. They could just go on and head up whatever non-geo or non-profit organization there is and just move the fuck on. They don't have to give a shit. So what is it that all these people have here in common? Huey's speech that I just told, I just explained and told us and talked about John Brown and Yuri Kuchiyama. What is it that they all have in common? I guess they have the I give a shit gene. They have the evolutionary gene. They have the I'm not a sociopath gene, because sociopaths lack empathy for other groups and people. That's what they have. And that's what they have in common. And there's nothing wrong with that. There's nothing special or exceptional. If anything, the majority of us in society, we're the freaks. We're the we are the minority as a majority, because it's common for us to only look out for who we are part of or who we represent. In the black community, black men, feel that they aren't empowered or represented because not everybody's collectively within the community who's not male and black and heterosexual are not collectively getting on their knees and sucking our dicks. When, on the other hand of it all, we define what's beautiful in black women, we want to define the roles, although we really aren't in the position of doing that, but we want to, and we want to whine about that. But none of us could actually talk about the statistics or the numbers of African American women who are currently in shelters, because they got to be in one, because they aren't, because they can't live where they used to live. Why? Because the man is there, and the man who's there was beating the shit out of them. You don't want to talk about that. They can't talk about those kinds of numbers. They don't want to talk about how we have such a high number of people in our community who have the HIV virus, and the fact that the majority of our people who have it are indeed women, but we don't want to talk about how they're getting it. So that's what I'm talking about. Like, it's weird in the eyes of some brothers in the community that other brothers give a shit about that, about people who are not our gender, or we're even worse or weirder if we give a shit about those who are not our sexual orientation. So no, we shouldn't have to be the minority. If anything, it's the other way around. You guys are the minority. You guys are the horrible exception within our community, because you should give a shit. We're not going to go anywhere without a full-on unity. That's just the truth. We're not going to get our liberation without a full-out unity amongst us. Cohesive, unbreakable. It's not going to happen if we don't care about what women in our community are going through, what people of other sexual orientation are going through. And especially if we're the main causes of what they're going through, we're not going to move forward. So that is probably the answer why all you motherfuckers who keep talking all this shit about, black, only black men issues and all of that, why it is that you really aren't building. Because quite frankly, if you're so strong in the community, then why, what's stopping you from being leaders that you say that everyone else is stopping you from? I mean, come on. You're full of shit. Anyway, the point is of this whole stream, because it was meant to be short, was just a talk about having the evolutionary gene. That's exactly when you care about other people enough to want to make change. Uh, that's the faces that you see on the screen. That's examples of that. If you don't like those examples, that's fine. Then that only means that you're just part of the coalition of shit and useless air breathers and space takers, and you always have been. And if you have a problem with this video, you're more than welcome to keep coming here and commenting, as some of you have on the last two videos, and you know who you are. Even the trolls, you can keep coming here. You're always welcome to comment, but just know and understand your role in the community, because that's what's causing the issues. All right, peace. This is the Garage Autonomist. I have more videos coming.